Have you ever felt that truth was calling your heart, even when it meant leaving everything behind? Imagine being one of the most famous and respected men in your entire country, having brilliant friends, a successful career, and the comfort of a secure life. And then, for the love of truth, deciding to give it all up, face rejection, scorn, and start over from scratch. This is the story of a man who was not afraid to follow the light of his conscience, no matter the cost. A man who crossed the storms of doubt to find the safe harbor of faith. Get ready to discover the extraordinary journey of Saint John Henry Newman, the cardinal who spoke heart to heart. John Henry Newman was born on February 21, 1801, in the bustling city of London, England. He was the eldest son in a family of 6 siblings. His father, John, was a hard-working banker, and his mother, Jemima, came from a French Protestant family. From a very young age, John was a studious, intelligent, and very observant boy. At 7, he was sent to a large school in Ealing, near London. There, he quickly stood out. His teachers said that no other boy had passed through the school grades as fast as he did. But John was not an ordinary boy. While other children played and ran in the yard, he preferred to spend his time reading books, writing stories, and even composing poems. He had a very vivid imagination and a deep sensitivity. However, during his childhood, religion was not something that touched his heart. He later wrote that, at 14, he wanted to be a good and virtuous person, but he did not want to be religious. The idea of loving God seemed distant and meaningless to him. He even read books that questioned faith and doubted God's truths. Everything changed in 1816, when John was 15. That year, his father's bank failed, bringing great difficulties to the family. But more important than that, it was the year John had a profound spiritual experience, which he called his first conversion. During the last semester at school, he was under the care of a very good teacher named Walter Mayers. Through conversations with his teacher and reading spiritual books, John felt God's presence in such a real and strong way that it changed his life forever. He later wrote that this inner conversion was more certain to him than the fact that he had hands and feet. It was at that moment that he understood that God was not just a distant idea, but a loving Father who cared about him. He felt that there were only 2 supreme and luminously evident beings in the universe, himself and his Creator. From that day on, John decided to dedicate his entire life to God. He even made the decision, still very young, that he would never marry, so he could serve God with all his heart and all his strength. With a heart full of this new love for God, John went to study at the famous University of Oxford. Oxford was a place of great prestige, full of old buildings, huge libraries, and brilliant professors. There, John studied hard, made great friends, and gradually became a very respected young man. In 1824, he was ordained a deacon in the Anglican Church, which was the official church of England. The following year, he became an Anglican priest. John Henry Newman was not just a priest. He was a brilliant teacher and thinker. He became the vicar of the University Church of St. Mary in Oxford. Every Sunday, the church was packed with students and professors who came to hear him preach. His sermons were not full of shouting or exaggerated emotions. On the contrary, he spoke with a soft, calm, and very clear voice. But his words had incredible power. They touched the depths of people's souls, making them want to be better, purer, and closer to God. At that time, the Anglican Church was going through a difficult moment. Many thought it was becoming just a government institution, forgetting its spiritual and sacred roots. Concerned about this, Newman, along with some very close friends, like John Cable and Hurrell Froude, started what became known as the Oxford Movement. Their goal was to remind the Church of England that it had an ancient history, going back to the times of the Apostles, and that it needed to recover the beauty, reverence, and depth of the original Christian faith. They began writing small booklets called tracts, which were spread throughout the country. Newman worked tirelessly. He studied the writings of the early Christians, the so-called Church Fathers, holy men who lived in the first centuries after Christ. The more he studied these ancient saints, the more he noticed something that began to trouble his heart. He started to see that the Catholic Church, which in England was much despised and persecuted, was the one that most resembled the church of the first Christians. This discovery was like a storm in Newman's life. He loved the Anglican Church, loved Oxford, loved his friends. But the voice of truth was speaking louder and louder inside him. He began to have deep doubts. Was the church he belonged to really the true Church of Christ? To try to find peace in God's answer, Newman made a very difficult decision. In 1842, he left the bustle of Oxford and moved to a small village called Littlemore. There, he rented a set of simple buildings that had once been stables and turned the place into a kind of monastery. He and some friends began living a life of much prayer, fasting, and study. They prayed for many hours a day, ate very little, and lived in silence. Newman wanted absolute certainty about what God was asking of him. He wrote a very important book about how Christian doctrine develops over time, like a seed that grows and becomes a great tree. It was during this time of silence and prayer in Littlemore that the light finally shone clearly in his mind and heart. He realized that the true Church of Christ, the same Church of the Apostles and Martyrs, was the Catholic Church. But taking this step meant losing everything. At that time in England, becoming Catholic was a cause for shame. It meant losing your job, being rejected by your family, and abandoned by friends. But John Henry Newman was a man of heroic courage. He knew that conscience is the voice of God speaking in the human heart, and he could not disobey that voice. On the night of October 8, 1845, a night of heavy rain and wind, an Italian Catholic priest named Father Dominic Barberi arrived at Littlemore. Father Dominic was a simple man, a passionist missionary who traveled through England preaching God's love. When Father Dominic entered the house, Newman, the great Oxford intellectual, the famous and respected man, fell to his knees before that simple priest and asked to be received into the Catholic Church. Newman's confession lasted so long that they had to stop to sleep and continue the next morning. On October 9, 1845, John Henry Newman made his profession of faith and became Catholic. He described this moment as if he were arriving at a safe harbor after a terrible storm at sea. There was a deep peace in his heart, the peace of one who has found the truth. But the outward suffering was immense. As he had predicted, many of his friends turned their backs on him. His own family did not understand him. He had to leave Oxford, the place he loved so much, and start a completely new life. The following year, Newman traveled to Rome to study and prepare to be a Catholic priest. There, he met the Oratory congregation, founded by Saint Philip Neri in the 16th century. Saint Philip Neri was known as the Saint of Joy, a man who attracted people to God with a smile, friendship, and great kindness. Newman was enchanted by this way of living the faith. He saw that the priests of the Oratory lived together like a family, without making solemn vows, united only by love for God and for each other. In 1847, Newman was ordained a Catholic priest in Rome. With the blessing of Pope Pius IX, he returned to England and founded the first oratory of St. Philip Neri in the country, in the city of Birmingham. There he lived the rest of his life, for more than 40 years. The great Oxford intellectual was now a simple priest in an industrial city. He cared for the poor, visited the sick, taught children, and heard confessions. He founded a school for boys and continued to write wonderful books that helped many people find faith. Newman's life as a Catholic was not easy. He faced many misunderstandings, both from former Protestant friends and from some Catholics who distrusted his brilliant ideas. Once, a famous writer publicly accused him of being a liar and of saying that Catholic priests did not need to tell the truth. Newman, with great patience and wisdom, wrote a book called Apologia Pro Vita Sua, which means Defense of His Life. In this book, he told the whole story of his heart, showing how his search for truth was always sincere and honest. The book was such a great success that even those who disagreed with him began to respect him deeply. John Henry Newman taught wonderful things about faith. He said that heart speaks to heart, cor ad cor loquitur, which became his motto. He believed that true religion is not just a matter of intelligence or memorizing rules, but a loving encounter between the heart of God and the heart of man. He also strongly defended the importance of conscience. He said that conscience is the first vicar of Christ, the sacred voice of God within us, which tells us what is right and what is wrong, and that we must always follow it, even if it costs us dearly. Time passed, and Newman's holiness and wisdom began to shine for the whole world to see. In 1879, Pope Leo XIII recognizing the immense value of all that Newman had done for the church, decided to give him a great honor. The Pope appointed him Cardinal of the Catholic Church. It was a moment of great joy and justice. The man who had been despised and rejected for following the truth was now honored by the Pope himself. When he received the news, Newman wept with emotion and said that the clouds had finally cleared. Even as a cardinal, Newman continued to live simply at the oratory in Birmingham, surrounded by his friends and the people he loved. He continued to pray, write, and guide souls to God until the end of his days. On August 11, 1890, at 89 years old, John Henry Newman gave his beautiful soul to God. He asked that on his tomb be written the phrase, "From shadows and images to the truth." He had finally reached the eternal light he had sought all his life. Newman's holiness continued to touch hearts even after his death. The church recognized two wonderful miracles that happened through his intercession. The first miracle occurred in 2001 in the United States. A man named Jack Sullivan, who was studying to be a deacon, suffered from a terrible spinal disease that left him almost paralyzed and in great pain. After praying for Cardinal Newman's help, he was inexplicably healed and was able to walk and serve God again. This miracle led to Newman's beatification in 2010 by Pope Benedict XVI. The second miracle, which led to his canonization, was even more remarkable. In 2013, a mother named Melissa Villalobos, who lived in Chicago, was pregnant with her fifth child. She began to suffer a very severe hemorrhage that put her life and the baby's life at risk. Alone at home and too weak to ask for help, she prayed with great faith, "Please, Cardinal Newman, stop the bleeding." At that very moment, the bleeding stopped completely, and she smelled a strong scent of roses in the air. The doctors could not explain what had happened. The baby, named Gemma, was born perfectly healthy. Because of these miracles and his life of heroic virtues, on October 13, 2019, Pope Francis declared John Henry Newman a saint of the Catholic Church. His feast day is celebrated on October 9th, the day he had the courage to enter the Catholic Church. The story you have just heard teaches us that the search for truth is the most important adventure of our lives. Saint John Henry Newman shows us that we should not be afraid to follow the voice of God in our conscience, even when the path is difficult and requires sacrifices. He teaches us that God is a loving Father who guides our steps, like a gentle light in the midst of darkness. May we, like Saint John Henry Newman, love the truth above all things. May we have the courage to leave behind what separates us from God and always seek the safe harbor of faith. And may our hearts always speak to the heart of God, and the heart of God always speak to ours. Saint John Henry Newman, pray for us. The story you have just heard is not only about the past, it is a seed for the future. Saints are not on a pedestal just to be admired. They are an invitation, a call for us to also be heroes of faith in our time, in our place. If this message touched your heart, do not keep it to yourself. The world needs light. The world needs hope. Be the bearer of this light. Share this video, subscribe so you don't miss any story, and above all, pray with us that more hearts